On April 11th, 2017, a quiet suburban night in Central Islip, Long Island, turned into a scene of unspeakable evil. 5 young men were lured to a community park by the promise of a safe, carefree escape, only to find themselves trapped in the deadly grasp of one of the most feared criminal organizations in the world. This is the story of the MS-13 massacre in Central Islip, Long Island. To understand how this tragedy could happen, we must first look at Long Island, New York, the area where it all unfolded, a place often associated with suburban peace and safety. But for years, areas like Brentwood, Central Islip, and Patchogue had struggled with gang violence. These communities, home to many immigrant families, found themselves caught between the promise of the American dream and the reality of violent gang culture. To understand the violence that tore through these communities, we need to look at the origins of MS-13, a gang founded in Los Angeles in the 1980s by Salvadorian immigrants seeking protection from other gangs. What started as a small group soon grew into a transnational criminal organization notorious for its brutality and strict code of silence. As MS-13 expanded, it found fertile ground on Long Island, where a rising number of Central American migrants settled and where rising poverty and disenfranchisement left many young people feeling isolated. The gang offered a dangerous allure: protection, belonging, and status, something many young people felt they could only find within the gang. The gang's reach extended deep into local communities, claiming more and more victims every year. By the time the massacre in Central Islip occurred, MS-13 had already been linked to countless murders, drug trafficking, and other violent crimes. Between 2015 and 2017 alone, the gang was tied to over 20 murders on Long Island. For the victims of this massacre in Central Islip, MS-13's deadly grip would cost them everything. At the center of this story is Leniz Escobar, also known as La Diablita, who at the time was a 17-year-old young woman desperate for respect. First raised by her grandmother in Honduras, at the age of 9, she was sent to the United States to live with an aunt in the state of Maine. At the age of 13, she went to live with another aunt, this time on Long Island in New York. She briefly attended Central Islip High School, but was frequently absent and did not complete the 9th grade. At the age of 15, she met and got into a romantic relationship with an older man who was a member of MS-13. The gang promised protection, respect, and a sense of belonging. That allure was too tempting for Leniz Escobar to resist. Once affiliated, her ambition grew, and with it, her willingness to prove herself. Also around this time, Leniz Escobar met Keyli Gómez, who was a year younger. The two quickly became close. Keyli Gómez, also caught up in the whirlwind of gang loyalty, admired Leniz Escobar and blindly followed her lead. When the two saw pictures on social media of an individual they knew was not affiliated, throwing up MS-13 gang signs, they knew that the penalty for this disrespect would be death. Escobar and Gómez met with MS-13 members on several occasions and helped set a trap and plan an attack. As part of the plan, the two invited then 16-year-old Alexander Arteaga Ruiz, who they recognized in the social media post, to a park in Central Islip just to hang out and smoke weed. The invitation was just a ruse used to lure Alexander Arteaga Ruiz into the trap, where he would eventually be attacked by MS-13 members. Arteaga Ruiz accepted the invitation. At the time, Arteaga Ruiz was just a typical teenager, caught between trying to fit into American society and dealing with the pressures of his background. Alexander Arteaga Ruiz invited friends to join him. He invited 16-year-old Justin Llivicura, 18-year-old Jorge Tigre, and 20-year-old Michael López. Also joining them was Michael López's cousin, 18-year-old Jefferson Villalobos, a Florida resident who happened to be visiting family on Long Island at the time. Alexander Arteaga knew this group of friends from school, local hangouts, and through mutual friends. Innocently, they all agreed to meet up that night, thinking they were just going to hang out at the park and smoke some weed. Before reaching the park, Leniz, Escobar, and Keyli Gómez appeared normal and calm, using the ruse of a friendly get-together to lure the victims in. They acted like two girls just meeting up with friends, hiding their true intentions and the deadly trap they had already set. According to reports, Escobar sent text messages to the waiting gang members to keep them informed about the victims' arrival, ensuring that the gang was ready to attack once the victims arrived. The group of young men, along with Leniz Escobar and Keyli Gómez, entered the park at around 10:30 p.m., unaware of the brutal attack that was about to unfold. Up to a dozen MS-13 gang members were waiting. They had positioned themselves in the dense wooded area of the park. When the 5 young men arrived, they were immediately ambushed. The gang members emerged from behind trees and from the shadows, armed with machetes and knives. They surrounded the group, ready to carry out the brutal attack. They ordered the 5 young men to kneel and threatened them with violence. Alexander Arteaga Ruiz instantly understood the severity of the situation. He understood that he was in the middle of a gang execution. His instincts kicked in. He got up and began running for his life. Some gang members carrying machetes gave chase. Arteaga Ruiz managed to jump over a fence, never looking back. Running as fast as he could, he managed to make his way out of the park and outrun his pursuers. This action saved his life. But the brutal attack on his 4 friends, Justin, George, Michael, and Jefferson, continued. They were not able to escape. The attack was done in a cold, calculated manner. They were hacked and slashed with machetes and knives. The brutality was overwhelming, and the gang members showed no mercy. They attacked with the intent to kill quickly, but it was a violent, prolonged assault. The victims were struck multiple times, leaving them with gruesome injuries. While the attack was swift, there is little doubt that the victims fought for their lives, but they were outnumbered and overpowered. The sheer violence of the attack meant that their survival was nearly impossible once the gang had them surrounded. After the brutal killings, the bodies of the 4 victims were left in that same secluded area of the park. The area was isolated enough that likelihood of immediate discovery was small. After escaping and in a state of shock and fear, Alexander Arteaga Ruiz knew he needed to inform the families of the victims. He called Michael López's older brother and said, "I saw your brother. He was being killed." But it wasn't until the next morning that Alexander returned to the park with Michael López's older brother and the bodies of the 4 victims were discovered. It's difficult to put into words just how savage the attacks on these 4 young men were. They were left almost unrecognizable, and many say it was one of the most violent crimes in the history of Long Island. In the days following the murders, Escobar, in a series of recorded phone calls with her then incarcerated boyfriend, Jeffrey Amador, casually discussed the brutal killings. Showing no remorse, she was actually happy and proud of what she had done. In one phone call, she says, "4 individuals took the train and who knows when they'll be back, got me?" This metaphor indicated that the 4 young men had been killed. She also noted that one person had escaped, stating, "But one of them managed to still be here, on the map, and he knows stuff about me, and now I'm in trouble." In another recorded phone call, Escobar expressed satisfaction with the outcome, saying she was happy for this to happen. Jeffrey Amador says to her, "I don't understand how one got away. The 5 were handed over on a silver platter," to which Escobar responds, He got away from them. It was a mistake. Law enforcement began their investigation shortly after the discovery of the bodies. Alexander Arteaga Ruiz served as a critical eyewitness, giving law enforcement detailed accounts of the attack and providing information on the gang members involved. Leniz Escobar was identified as the mastermind of the murders, orchestrating the killing as a way to prove herself within MS-13. Law enforcement obtained cell phone records, revealing that Escobar and other gang members had been in the park area around the time of the killings. Law enforcement worked closely with local communities, trying to break the gang's hold on neighborhoods and gain cooperation from reluctant witnesses who feared retaliation. Surveillance footage from nearby businesses and public areas helped track the movements of Escobar, Gómez, and other MS-13 members in the days leading up to the attack. Witnesses who had seen Escobar and Gómez in the park or in the vicinity were interviewed, contributing to the timeline of the events. MS-13's strict code of silence made it difficult to get information, but witness cooperation and gathering intelligence from the community allowed authorities to piece together the puzzle. Once the authorities had enough digital evidence, witness testimonies, and forensics, they apprehended Escobar, Gómez, and several other gang members. Escobar was arrested in June 2017 while in Maine, where she had been living with relatives after the murders. Gómez was arrested shortly afterward. Keyli Gómez pled guilty to racketeering murder and obstruction of justice. She would go on to cooperate with authorities and testify against Leniz Escobar, pointing Escobar out as the ringleader. Gómez was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. In court, Keyli Gómez expressed concerns about potential retaliation upon her release. During her sentencing on February 24, 2025, U.S. Circuit Judge Joseph F. Bianco acknowledged these risks, stating that if Gómez were deported back to El Salvador, she would likely face death. Exactly 5 years after the attack on April 11, 2022, Leniz Escobar was found guilty of racketeering, including predicate acts of murder, conspiracy to murder rival gang members, and obstruction of justice. She was also convicted of murder in aid of racketeering in connection with the April 11, 2017 murders. Escobar was sentenced to 50 years in federal prison on October 1, 2024 by U.S. District Judge Joseph F. Bianco. Justin Llivicura was only 16, an aspiring DJ. A quiet, creative soul, he worked at a restaurant and spent his free time honing his passion for music. His mother feared for his safety as he started to drift away from home, dropping out of school, but she never imagined the ultimate danger he would face. He had asked her for permission to go out that night, and although she had said no, she checked his bedroom later, only to realize he had gone out anyway. Jorge Tigre had migrated to the U.S. from his native Ecuador. He was 18 and a recent high school graduate. He had dreams of a bright future. His mother, who worked tirelessly to provide for him, stated that her son was a very responsible young man and would always do anything she asked of him. Michael López, 20, had come to the U.S. as an unaccompanied minor. He had witnessed the brutal killings of his friends back in Honduras. On Long Island, he worked at a supermarket, hoping to build a future free from the violence he had escaped. He never thought it would catch up with him here. Jefferson Villalobos, 18, had also migrated from Honduras as an unaccompanied minor. He had settled in Florida, where he became a star soccer player. Jefferson had no ties to gang life. He came to the U.S. hoping for a better future, only to fall victim to a deadly misunderstanding. He had only come to Long Island to visit his cousin Michael. The MS-13 massacre in Central Islip, Long Island, had a devastating impact on the community, highlighting the growing threat of gang violence in suburban areas. The brutal killings left residents shaken, fostering fear and a sense of vulnerability, especially within immigrant communities already struggling with displacement and hardship. For the victims' families, the loss was incomprehensible. Justin, George, Michael, and Jefferson were all taken too soon, leaving their families grappling with immense sorrow and questions about how their loved ones could have been targeted despite having no ties to gang activity. The emotional tolls on the families and the community will remain permanently.